Welcome to the Baseball Insiders. I am Adam Weinrib, joined as always by Fanside. It's MLB insider Robert Murray. And yes, this is one of those frosty late September days where we're going to be counting on the comment section to give us some live score updates because the AL wildcard race is tightening, and it's tightening as we speak. The Detroit Tigers, the greatest team in baseball, the team that sold at the deadline, the team that we analyzed their Jack Flaherty deal only a month and a half ago, are firmly at the edges of the postseason race. The Minnesota Twins are barely hanging on, and they are headed to somewhere I would conservatively call a house of horrors over the weekend. Enjoy Fenway Park. The Red Sox not dead yet. The Seattle Mariners in between the Red Sox and the Tigers. There's a cluster, folks. There is a cluster. We're going to be talking about that ever increasingly interesting race, plus Juan Soto's milestone homer and the comment that came with it, Stephen Vogt and an amazing class of first-year managers, and a crowd Q&A. I also will not be disappearing today, so get your questions in. Robert Murray, how you doing, dude?
I'm great, man. I'm even better now that you're here with me. Because the last show it felt a little empty not having you alongside me here. But we're back. We're reunited today. Got no computer issues, and we got a lot of stuff going on in baseball. We got a lot of competition here with the playoffs looming in the next couple of weeks, and there's a lot of teams that are surging. There's teams that are falling. It is absolutely fascinating, and it is going to result in the next couple of weeks just being pure chaos. I am so here for it. We got some free agent thoughts. Free agency is obviously still like a decent ways away, but we'll always have thoughts. I've got some insight into what could possibly happen with Juan Soto and what his contract could look like. But first of all, Adam, how are you doing?
I am doing well, depending on the Juan Soto update. Just kidding. We're going to talk Juan Soto, obviously. In the moment, we're at 10 games or 9 games left, depending on your team in the regular season. The postseason is closer than you probably are even thinking. There's still plenty to get done in a regular season, though. We've got plenty of leads where the lid has not been placed on the clinch quite yet. If your team is up 3 with 9 remaining, I hate to break it to you, but you're not in the postseason yet. I'm leaving the Kansas City Royals spot up for grabs at this point as well, depending on who heats up and all the machinations. We'll talk about all that in a second, though. If you want to talk to us between shows, I recommend you join the Discord. I'm sure a lot of you are already in there. You can join at the Rumor Mill tier to get access to Robert and I between shows, ask us questions, get in on the ground floor. If you join at the All-Star level, you get a private Zoom once a month. We got to figure out another one for end of September. And you also get priority responses in the chat. So bring your questions to the All-Star channel, or if we see you hanging out here in the comments, we'll answer your questions early. Additionally, as the playoffs approach, there's no better time to subscribe to the Moonshot. That's our weekly baseball email newsletter, where the fan-sided MLB team, including Robert Murray, break down all the biggest stories in the big leagues with humor, insight, and behind-the-scenes info. So get the Moonshot in your inbox, get in the Discord, and join us on the Baseball Insiders Live every Monday, Thursday, at 3:30 Eastern. Good to be back. But a team that is not saying good to be back is the team that is watching their back. The Minnesota Twins have allowed the Detroit Tigers to get hot. Why did they do that? Look, sometimes when a team loses grip on a playoff position, it's because they choked. Sometimes a team behind them just comes out and gets it from them. I would say this is a combination of the two. The Minnesota Twins have not been an elite team or a playoff team for about a month now. That opened the door, but the Detroit Tigers were not one of the teams in the area where it seemed like that was going to matter for them. They were well under 500. They were 10 games out just about a month ago, and now all of a sudden it's a half game, depending on the result of Twins Guardians this afternoon. They could be tied entering the weekend with 9 to play. We're going to talk Twins and potential ramifications, but I want to give the Tigers their flowers first. What is your read on this team? Not to even make prognostications, but just to congratulate them on a job well done already with an eye on the rest of the season and certainly 2025 in the future based on what they've accomplished this year.
Yeah, they're the hottest team in baseball right now. And I don't think there's anybody in their right minds in baseball, around baseball, fans, you name it, who could have seen that coming with the Tigers, because they look dead to rights. They were, as you said, 10 games back, and at the deadline, they ended up selling Jack Flaherty. They sold off some other pieces, and they look like a team that was just destined to miss the postseason and kind of continue to be where they've been at for the longest time. And now here we are. They're in very real contention here for a postseason spot. You look, as you said, a half game back of the Twins right now. And then they're also like within striking distance of the Royals here. So it's not like they could just catch the Twins here. They can also catch the Royals pretty easily. They're only a game and a half back of them. And I mean, both the Royals and Twins are 4-6 in their last 10, while the Tigers are 8-2 in their last 10. So they've caught 4 games on both those teams in the last 10. Anything can happen. And I give a whole lot of credit to that coaching staff and the players in Detroit for being able to kind of overcome selling off of the deadline, overcoming a 10-game deficit for a postseason spot. Like, because it's not easy. It's not easy at all. But it's been ever since Scott Harris and AJ Hinch took over in Detroit, they had a much stronger leadership than they had when Al Avila was there running that front office. Because with Avila, they didn't really seem to have much direction, or like it just the Javi Baez contract really was kind of like the nail in the coffin for him there, because that was just a disaster. And the fact that they're doing this with Baez on the books is also like equally impressive as well. But one thing that the Tigers have really done well is like maximizing their pitching. Obviously, having Tariq Skubal has been, I mean, having him atop your rotation is a really good thing. But they've been able in the last couple of years to maximize some free agent pitchers. So it's a case of signing Michael Lorenzen last year, having him pitch really well, trading him to Philadelphia, and then he struggled. They signed Jack Flaherty, who was kind of a boom or bust candidate. He was a major boom. And if it wasn't for some injury questions or whatever, like that haul at the deadline would have been bigger and better. But both those pitchers have pitched really well in Detroit. And I can confidently tell you this, players and agents have noticed that. They are like, if they have a pitcher in free agency, whether he's an established guy or if he's a guy who's coming up here, or kind of like a boomer bust candidate, like what Lorenzen and Flaherty were, I think Detroit's going to be one of the teams that they eye up, because they know that they're going to be able to put them in position to succeed. So that's why I'm optimistic. Like, this is not a flash in the pan. I think this could be the beginning of potentially some contention here in Detroit, which has not happened recently, but it's a position that they're in right now. I think they're a very real playoff threat, and they're not going to go away. So props AJ Hinch, props Scott Harris, because that was a very difficult job when you guys took over, and now you're starting to see some fruit to the labor.
And they are very clearly a team that has a shot at a playoff berth this year, and that is bad news for the Baltimore Orioles, who already got them last weekend. The Tigers took 2 of 3 in Detroit. The O's and Tigers link up again this weekend before the season ends. That is a dangerous matchup and a vibes clash right now. The Tigers believe, and the Orioles, as the comment section is telling me, 2 Orioles outfielders just collided, and the game is now tied with the Giants. If the Giants are able to capture that one, that'll be a Giants sweep in Baltimore. I don't think the O's, who are playing for seeding and still playing for the AL East right now, have any interest in seeing the Tigers come to town, but here they come. Make the schedule. And the schedule makers, by the way, like, how do they know? Why are the Tigers facing the Orioles so many times at the end of this year? Why does it matter so much? Why are the flailing Twins going to Fenway Park for one of their final 3 series of the year, where the Red Sox are, if you're asking me, hey, are they completely, if you're a Red Sox fan, you're looking for hope, like, you want me to just stomp on you and say you're completely dead? I can't say that, because you're 4 games out right now, with 10 for you to play, 9 for the Tigers to play. Obviously, being behind the Tigers doesn't help, but the Royals, you're 5 back of them. That's tough, but you're 4 back of the Twins. The Twins lose every day, and you play the Twins 3 times this weekend at your home ballpark, where you haven't played quite as well as you have on the road, but still, it's your home. Those fans should be relatively fired up. Let's see what they can summon. The Twins bullpen will certainly give them cause to be fired up based on the way they performed lately. I got to talk about Minnesota, because I think if you just look at playoff percentages and the talent on the roster, like, Fangraphs was bullish on them all summer for a reason. They're telling Twins fans not to worry, but the door is fully open. They're lucky that the Royals just had a tough set with the Tigers, because now there are 2 spots potentially up for grabs. We could get a scenario where the Twins survive, the Tigers keep surging, and the Royals fall out. But if you're Minnesota, a team that cut payroll year over year after one of their most successful seasons in franchise history, Pablo Lopez sends them to the DS last year. They put up a fight against Houston, This year, they don't exactly reload. They don't do much of anything at the deadline. They lose Sonny Gray. They lose some of the key pieces. And now here they are, potentially caught from behind in the final weeks of the season. I mean, does that organization make changes if that happens? Is their future up for grabs right now, or are they confident in their process, whether they fall out of the postseason or not?
I think they should be confident in their process because there's a reason why so many people have been bullish on this team. Like the talent is there. Obviously, ownership not extending payroll that's an issue, and that's something that they should absolutely do moving forward because they have a very talented core group of players, and like trying to add around that to maximize your postseason chances. I think that would be a really smart thing because if you look at it, like there's no real runaway favorite team here in the American League. Like the Yankees obviously have like the best record in the AL, but they're only 89-63. I mean, that's really good, obviously, but we're not talking like a 105, 106 win team by any means. Mm-hmm. So there's no real dominant team, and like the best record in the AL was there for the taking. But the Twins, it's unfortunate their collapse here. If you look at it, like they have 3 rookie pitchers, their bullpen lacks depth, and there's just questions overall with the roster. Like, I mean, we'll see ultimately what happens here, but if they end up missing the postseason, I don't think a guy like Rocco Baldelli will be on the hot seat. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I have a different read on it than some others do, but I think that'd be a pretty big overreaction by them because I consider him to be one of the best managers in baseball for a reason. He was highly regarded as a player. And he's highly thought of in that clubhouse. He's highly thought of in league circles. And his results in Minnesota, like this year and previously, I think speak for themselves. So if he's put on the hot seat now and like if he's let go, I think that'd be a major mistake. And I think there'd be some teams that scoop him up immediately. So I don't think he's going to be on the hot seat. Maybe there's going to be room for some potential changes on the coaching staff if there are indeed, or if they do indeed miss the postseason here, which, I mean, that's pretty possible considering they're right on the fringe here. I mean, they got the Tigers breathing right down their neck, and there's some other teams that are only 3 or 4 games back. So we'll see, but I think Baldelli will be safe. That's my read as of right now.
Tigers play the White Sox too, which is the sentence that no Twins fan wants to hear, or Royals fan, or anybody else in that mix. The final series.
Speaking of that, speaking of the White Sox, how about that piece in The Athletic today from Rosenthal and Briccaroli?
Let's talk about that a little bit too, because how about the power struggle in Chicago? That is sort of it's one of those where look, sometimes reporters wait to do the reveal until after the season's over, and we can really pick up the Patriots dynasty is over. Pieces came out every time the Patriots lost in the playoffs. When you have 36 wins or whatever the White Sox have, you can release those in mid-September. You can talk about the dysfunction and the power struggle. It seems like they can't get their analytics information right. They're getting numbers that clash. They've got constant heads butting in the front office. Nothing changes year over year. And it all sort of comes down on Jerry Reinsdorf. And if you're a White Sox fan looking for a silver lining, you got to look a little deeper at the end of this dreadful season. Yeah.
And the future is not exactly the present.
The future is dark. Yeah. The future is dark.
And like the present is even more dark somehow. I read the story today, and I mean, it was a pretty damning story. It made Jerry Reinsdorf look really bad, made Chris Getz look really bad as well. And I asked some folks there in Chicago, and I've gotten responses from a couple of people. I'm waiting for responses from some others. I do think the criticism of Reinsdorf is fair. I know he's not exactly the most highly regarded owner in baseball. I think that's putting it very, very lightly. Well, I kind of took issue with, and like some of the people that I talked to as well, kind of took issue with the criticism of Getz and just that situation there overall. Because when he took over, that was a job that was not going to be a 1-year fix. That wasn't going to be a 2-year fix, maybe not even a 3-year fix. Like that job was, figure you buy yourself a really beat up car and you want to like restore it, rebuild it, and get that thing up and running again. That takes time, and it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of resources. And like there was a lot of stuff they had to gut with that organization, and analytically they need to improve. Like that is absolutely the case. But Getz is a really good dude. There's people who really think he's done. I mean, he's made some questionable moves. I think the FAM and Michael Kopech and Eric Fetty trade was one of his most questionable moves, but he's done some good things there. I mean, maybe we're not necessarily seeing it on the roster right now, but he's trying to implement his own practices behind the scenes. It takes time. It's not going to happen in one season. So I'm saying, like, between him and I will say another guy that's in that front office that is extremely highly regarded, who will be a GM one day, is Josh Barfield. I have heard unbelievable things about him. Bless you, Adam. There you go. You muted yourself. Nobody could hear the sneeze.
Oh, I muted myself, but it was one of those with a long rev up, and I was like, man, how long am I going to be on the screen sneezing? Apparently 10 seconds.
Yeah, there you go. Well, it was a good job, but they got some good pieces there in that front office. It's going to take a lot of time. I'm a little concerned about the quality of manager they're going to be able to attract in the offseason, considering, I mean, just how behind they are analytically and also just how bad that roster is overall. So we'll see, but I thought some of that story was fair, and I thought some other parts of it were not necessarily like the most fair either.
Yeah, I do. I think your comparison to the White Sox last offseason as a fixer-upper car may even be a little too generous. It's like buying a fixer-upper house and then being like, I'm going to turn this house into a 4-door sedan. Like, it didn't even necessarily look like a baseball team. And now we're in a spot where the rebuild has to be significant. And I think we're going to get some more enlightening updates on that as the years go by. And unfortunately, the payroll going down year over year. So make sure those eye holes in your paper bags are snug, or make sure they fit well, because you're probably going to have to use them again next year. But if there's hope, it's that, man, these first year managers across Major League Baseball, if you got to hire a manager these days more than ever, you've got a great class to choose from. And look, maybe this year's the outlier ultimately, but thinking about the AL Central and all, this is an AL Central only episode, but watching Stephen Vogt after his comeback win on Monday, basically tears in his eyes, talking about how much he loves those guys. I mean, he has fulfilled every hope, dream, and more that the Guardians felt when he transitioned from his playing days, took over for Terry Francona. That's an all-time first-year hire. And you want to say, well, okay, manager of the year, best first-year hire of all time. Matt Quatraro, also an incredible first-year hire. Joe Espada, the Astros were underwater midseason. Everyone's saying this team has too much talent to be as bad as they are. And, well, you're right. Joe Espada guided them from the depths back into the postseason race. Honestly, just Carlos Mendoza, Citi Field. We just talked to I talked to Danny Wexelman of SNY on the Yanks Go Yard podcast today, and she said his calm guiding hand has been essential for that Mets team that's on the verge of a playoff berth themselves. I know you're probably confident there are more great managers to be mined that haven't gotten the chance yet, but it feels like one of the best eras we've ever had to be a first-year manager getting your sea legs. These people are all so prepared for the job.
Oh, they totally are. And by the way, Danny Wexelman, we love her. She's one of the nicest people in baseball.
She was so good. And if you're a Yankees or Mets fan, watch her back on Yankees Go Yard today. We just put it up. She was incredible.
Yeah, she's one of the nicest people in baseball. I've only talked to her a little bit, but I've heard unbelievable things about her as a person. So shout out to Danny. But you are absolutely correct about this managerial class just being one of the best in recent memory. Like, you look at it, all the guys that you ended up mentioning, but the one that I really want to highlight before I get into the others is Stephen Vogt. I remember being around him in Milwaukee, and when I was covering the Brewers for The Athletic, and he was, you could tell he just had it, and he was always around counsel. He was like a veteran voice for a lot of the young players, and even some of the veteran players as well. And I mean, you look in that locker room, they had Vogt, they had Eric Kratz, and I mean, I could see Kratz being a manager one day as well. So, but Vogt, I remember hearing a story a few years ago where it was just at the start of the offseason, and Vogt was a free agent, and he ended up getting a call from a team. I got to leave the team out for some certain reasons. But the team wasn't interested in him as a player. They wanted to interview him for their manager job. And he was like, I want to still be a player. I appreciate the interest. But even when he was in Milwaukee and even when he was still playing, like, teams viewed him as a manager and a potential very good manager. Like, we're talking top 5 manager potential here. And there is a reason why the Guardians were so aggressive in trying to get him, because I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think if the timeline was a little bit different, where Counsell leaves for Chicago a little bit earlier and Stephen Vogt still available for the Brewers to hire, part of me wonders if Vogt could have been the guy in Milwaukee instead of Pat Murphy. That's a huge what if. That's not sourced or anything, but I remember even at the time when I was covering the Brewers for The Athletic, it was a few years ago, like I asked somebody, or somebody even mentioned, somebody mentioned to me like off the cuff, like once like Council's done, like they think that Vogt would replace him in Milwaukee. Didn't end up happening, but he's done some unbelievable things with the Guardians, and they are one of the best teams in baseball for a reason, and he's a huge part of that. Mendoza's been brilliant in New York. Like him and David Stearns together have been an unbelievable pairing. So good job. It seems like they finally have some good leadership in New York after all these years of kind of struggling with that. So props to them. And just even Joe Espada too. I remember when they were struggling at the start of the season, like you were talking to different fans around Houston, or just even seeing fans on Twitter. They wanted Espada fired. Yeah. And that was a huge overreaction. Like that's why fans are not owners or GMs, because I mean, you got to give your guys patience. And like, that was a tough situation. And he ended up bouncing back, and now he's going to have them most likely winning the division. So good job by Espada for bouncing back there. Obviously, a burner. Council seat is not lukewarm. He is safe. They're not going to fire him 1 year after signing him to the richest deal for a manager in baseball history. Drew, by the way, this is Mountain Dew, not ginger ale. And good job, Adam, for making Drew sneeze. Yeah. But yeah, this managerial class was incredible.
Kind of fun for me to make you sneeze. Comment section saying Orioles win. Nice job by the O's, surviving, holding on. You can't get swept by the Giants at home. So they will go into tomorrow in that Tiger series with a 1-game winning streak, modest 1-game winning streak, as the Yankees look to hold serve in Seattle. Baseball is fun. And speaking of Seattle, that is the one ballpark entering this week that Juan Soto had not homered in. Took care of that. Don't even worry about it. He had 4 on his list entering this season that he never homered in. Chicago White Sox, guaranteed rate. He did that. Anaheim did it. Texas did it. Seattle got her done. Game 1 of a 3-game series. They only played 1 series in each of those 4 ballparks this year, meaning Juan Soto had only 1 3-game chance to get that done, and he did it every single time. This was his 200th homer, special hitter, special season, and his only season with the New York Yankees at this moment in time. When the year ends, he will be a free agent, and he made that known once again, discussing that milestone homer, his 200th, the one that checked all the boxes. He said, "It's a great feeling for me. So many different ballparks, so many different dimensions. I just want to get all of them checked in." What a way to go into free agency with all 30 ballparks checked on my list. Now, that's true. I don't think there are any teams that are interested in pursuing Juan Soto that were going to be like, he never homered in Seattle. All right, dock him $50 million. We're not as interested as we used to be. So, yeah, I don't think there was a real need for the checklist, but still, milestone homer, big moment for his Yankee team as they inch closer to clinching the division. They got their playoff berth yesterday, and he's talking about, I'm in a good spot entering free agency. We know he's going for an all-time free agent contract. We know the Yankees and Mets are hot on his tail. Just felt like the right time to check in once again on, hey, what's the pulse of Soto's free agency? No more time to talk about a preemptive strike extension because it's September 19th. He's obviously entering the offseason as a free agent. But what's your current read on the situation? And as obviously a burner says, any mystery teams, because we're all looking for him right now.
Yeah, there's no teams in on Soto quite yet because his free agency hasn't started.
Legally, yes, there is.
Yeah. But as far as Soto goes, like he is absolutely going to test free agency. Like that's always been the case. Like that's never wavered. There was never any chance of that changing because he has turned down very lucrative extensions with the Nationals. There was obviously some talks with the Padres when he was there in San Diego, but he was. Boris always wants his players to test the open market just to establish their value and try to get the most money. And that's always been the case, especially with his top guys. And this one will be no different. And when he eventually does sign, my feel is it is going to exceed $500 million.
Oh, yeah.
And I would expect Boris to try everything in his power to exceed what Shohei Ohtani's present day value was in his extension, because there was a lot of deferrals in that. And it's not actually like valued at $700 million. So I would expect Boris to try to beat that number because, I mean, he's a competitive guy. He's going to want to have like the biggest present day contract in baseball history. And Soto's his best chance of doing that. So I think that's going to end up being something that's important to him. As far as the teams that I think could be involved in the Soto sweepstakes, I'll look at the New York Mets. I look at the Yankees. I would look at, like, there's some other teams. Like, I'll give you 3 teams that I think could be maybe long shots, but make sense here. First one is Philadelphia. I think Philly, like, they always like star players. They pursued Yamamoto. They offered him a contract reportedly of over $300 million. So they got money to spend, and Dombrowski loves star players, but also the presence of Kevin Long as their hitting coach, because Kevin Long was Soto's hitting coach in Washington, and we've seen how highly regarded he is among players that he had in Washington or even now in Philly. Like, you have Schwarber there, and he's who credits Schwarber credits Long for, like, getting his career jump started and getting him back on track. You have Trey Turner there as well. You have Bryce Harper. I mean, could they do it again and try to get over Juan Soto? Just my own speculation, but that feels like a very Philadelphia Phillies kind of move in Dave Dombrowski. So that's one I'm watching for. I think the Cubs will have some conversations there, but I kind of think they're probably more likely to lean toward a guy like Corbin Burns in free agency, considering his connection to Craig Counsell and their need for a frontline starting pitcher. And another one I think is the San Francisco Giants. Mm-hmm. The Giants have been star hunting for a while now. They were after Bryce Harper. They were after Giancarlo Stanton. They were after Aaron Judge. Like, they're after a lot of these guys. Swung and missed on all of them, obviously. Like, well, they had a deal in place for Stanton, but then he vetoed it. So, I mean, that kind of was maybe a blessing in disguise for them.
That would have been weird. Yeah,
that would have been very weird. But I think the Giants will try to get involved in that one as well. Who's their president of baseball operations at that point? I don't think anybody knows. So, like, to answer your question, Sports Glory from before, there's no new news on Farhan besides what we ended up mentioning on Monday. But yeah, those are the teams that I'm watching right now. I'm sure there's going to be more that surface as the offseason gets closer in here, but we're not there yet. But those are the teams that I'm looking at right now.
Yeah, I was going to say the Giants offer, I guess, depends on whether or not Buster Posey has Juan Soto's phone number. But the early arms race is very funny. You've got Kevin Long and the Phillies. You know, they're already, these moves have been put in place months ago. The Nationals, when the Yankees visited Washington, were putting the squeeze on Soto a little bit. You know, his old friends were there. The Yankees have Pat Rossler in the dugout, who was like Soto's close confidant from his Washington days alongside Kevin Long. And I think that's gone unnoticed this year. Sometimes you're watching a Yankee game, you just see a random middle-aged man in the dugout. You're like, who's that? It's Pat Rossler. It's one of Soto's guys. You know, all these teams that want him are trying to lay the foundation. Meanwhile, Stevie Moneybags, you can no longer say that going to the Mets is antithetical to winning, because the Mets are also kicking ass, and we might have playoff baseball in both New York boroughs with professional baseball this year. All due respect to the Staten Island Ferry Hawks. I don't know if they're making the playoffs or not, but I do know that Pablo Sandoval pitched for you last week, and that is probably a bigger accomplishment than any World Series ring. Man, I love playoff baseball. Shout out to the clinchers from this week. Shout out to the Milwaukee Brewers, who rolled out a barrel of non-alcoholic beer for 20-year-old Jackson Churio. I assume that no alcohol touched his lips yesterday, and that purity is what keeps him one of the best young hitters in baseball. Shout out to the Yankees, celebrating a playoff berth, celebrating a wild card clinch, not a division clinch. That rubs some people the wrong way. Not me. I say you should party when you have the chance to. And we've got some more clinches hopefully on the horizon this weekend. This has been an amazing September, and it's going to be a pretty intense October. And look, if you're looking at the playoff bracket, it's not settled yet. Shout out to the Padres, by the way, for taking 2 to 3 from the Astros. The bracket could be, we might see the Diamondbacks and Brewers, which did not go so well for Milwaukee last year. We might see the Mets and Padres, which did not go so well for the Mets in 2022. It's these, if MLB is obviously salivating at the potential running it back of these recent young rivalries that could potentially evolve into something more in the next couple of years. It's not just Phillies Dodgers. These go really deep, and there are a lot of familiar faces and some teams with histories that could be lined up to play this October.
Oh, absolutely. And it's going to be a thrilling postseason. I can already kind of tell just from it has a feel of like so much unpredictability, but there's one team that I think dark horse at this point may not be the right phrasing, because I think everyone is aware of them. I do think the Padres are a very real threat to represent the National League in the World Series. I think this is the year where this is their best team that they've had in a while. And Preller, he was in the hot seat. Well, okay, let me rephrase that. He was not on the hot seat. He was on the hot seat publicly among the fan base, but not ever like internally with that organization. But he was feeling the pressure, and he's come through and really kind of put that team in a really strong position to contend. And he had less resources this year than he's had previously, but he was still able to do it. And yeah, I think he's earned himself another year, maybe 2, or just however long in San Diego, because he's done a masterful job in constructing this roster. Who would have thought that they would trade Juan Soto and somehow end up being better? That is kind of a weird thing to say, but the emergence of Dylan Cease cannot be overstated enough. He's been awesome. So I do think the Padres hype is very real. You're welcome, Drew. I promised it on the last show, and here I am now. But yeah, I firmly believe in the Padres.
Well, he was just waiting for me to do the Padres hype. I'm a believer in the Padres as well. Good job by AJ Preller squeezing all that value. And best of luck to Drew Thorpe in Chicago with the White Sox. You're a talented man, but you're going to need it. We will see you on Monday afternoon, 3:30 Eastern, right back here. We'll know a little bit more about where things stand with 6 games remaining in the regular season. Plenty of teams making the postseason with intrigue and warts. There are no perfect teams. There are plenty of good teams with flaws, so there are plenty of teams that could go all the way. We will be talking it up next weekend as well. Subscribe to the Moonshot. If you haven't, subscribe to the Baseball Insiders. Like this video. Thank you for joining us. Please come back again. We'd love to see you here. Join the Discord. Rumor Mill tier gets you access to Robert and I between shows. All-Star tier, priority responses in the chat, priority responses on the feed. We shout you out more often. Just get those questions in ahead of time or show up in the comments. Thanks to everybody for joining us today. Robert Murray, felt good to do a show. I was here for longer than 2 minutes this time. That might have been my favorite part, but it was a great show regardless.
It absolutely was. I am very excited to keep doing more and more shows with you and not have you bounce after 2 minutes. But we appreciate everyone who tuned in for the show today. I appreciate you, Adam. Joanne, our lovely producer, I appreciate you as well. We will see everyone back here as normal on Monday. And yeah, we will talk to you then.
We sure will. See everybody back here on Monday afternoon, 3:30. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.